All right. Well, we'll wait for Amazon to catch up, but we're going to get started here because we're going to do this. William Carl, PhD. This is Dr. Carl. A lot of people call him Bill, but we're going to stick with William because if you look up William Carl, you're going to find his books there. And let me put this back up. We're talking today about Assassin's Manuscript, which is a book, William, that you did some research with actual assassins and hitmen to write this book. It's available in paperback. It's available on Kindle. And we'll talk a little bit about your son because he did the voice recording for the Audible version of this book. But let's get started and say, just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background, why you chose to write this book, because you've written a number of other books that are not in this genre at all. In fact, they're nonfiction books. So I believe this is your first novel that you've put out. So William, let's let you take the stage and tell us about who you are and how you got to write Assassin's Manuscript.
Thank you. It's great to be on your show here, Scott. And yeah, I'm academic and clergy. I bounce back and forth between the classroom and the church, and taught at Union Seminary in Richmond, Virginia. I was pastor in Dallas, president of Pittsburgh Seminary, pastor in Birmingham. And I was lecturing lots of places around the world, Oxford and Cambridge and Princeton and lots of places. And I wrote 8 nonfiction books. But one day, sitting in my office over 30 years ago there in Dallas was Alex Haley, the author of Roots. I had him speak at something called the Town Hall Forum. And he said, "Have you written anything?" I said, "Yeah, a few books, nonfiction." He said, "Well, let me see one." I pulled one off the shelf, handed it to him. It was a set of lectures I'd given at Princeton. He sat there and started thumbing it. Alex Haley, the author of Roots, is thumbing my book, and he says, "Bill, you need to write a novel." He really said that to me, Scott. He said, "Alex, what makes you say that?" And he said, 2 things. You know how to write, you write really well, and you know how to tell a story. And that's all a novel is. Now, Scott, did you think that's all a novel is just writing well and telling a story?
Well, if Alex Haley told me, I would believe it.
Well, I was on another show, and the person interviewing me said, "People will say to you all the time, you ought to write a book." Lots of people will say, "You ought to write a book," and you sort of ignore them. But if Alex Haley says you need to write a book, you got to pay attention to that. So I said, "Well, I don't know. What kind would I write?" And he said, "What do you like?" I said, "Oh, Tom Clancy, Jason Bourne, Robert Ludlum, international espionage." He said, "Write one like that." I said, "You know my background. I don't know anything about all that." He said, "Well, you're a Greek scholar. You know about old manuscripts. Why don't you combine old manuscripts with international espionage?" Okay, that started me on the journey over 30 years ago, which is still hard to believe that It finally came to fruition. Yeah.
So this is one of those, I'll say, chicken and egg things. So Alex Haley looks through your books and says, "Wow, William, you should write a novel." How did Alex Haley end up in your office?
Well, he was a friend, and some of our family members knew him, and I had invited him to speak at something we called Town Hall Forum, which was kind of like Chautauqua up in Western New York, where we brought in big name speakers. And so I brought him to speak, and he had told us stories at a dinner party that night, and he regaled us with amazing stories. He was an unbelievable storyteller. And he also was a very positive person. It's a good thing to bring up during Black History Month here, that Alex was one of the most positive, encouraging persons I've ever met. And his mantra was, find the good and praise it. And he did that with everybody he met. And he obviously did that with me that day.
Wow. Wonderful. I just remember being a child when the series Roots was on television. And there was a lot of of groundbreaking that was done with that series. In fact, I believe it was one of the first true what they called miniseries, which is something that we see regularly now, right? A lot of shows come out with these 6 series because they go, well, we can't make a 10-hour movie, but we can make 10 1-hour episodes, right? So,
well, and that's what's really going on with Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, all the different streaming video services are creating these series, and people are binging on them. It's, my wife and I are binging on Young Sheldon right now. It's just so funny, just cracking up watching that thing. But in many ways, I've written a screenplay on the novel Assassin's Manuscript, but it's much shorter and pared down because the novel is so big and complex with so many places around the world and so many characters. And that's what Alex Haley had to do. They had to do that with Roots. It was just too big.
Right. Yeah. That's so he set the stage for a lot of folks to be able to write longer stories, to tell longer stories. And so let's just break into the novel a little bit, because this is all about a retired CIA agent. And there's something that happens with his last assignment.
Yeah. Former CIA hitman. Yeah. And this is actually handled in flashbacks because Charles Cornwell, who is the former husband of Patricia Cornwell and her editor, was my editor through all 12 revisions of this novel. And he's the one who told me, take the big explosion out of the beginning of the novel and handle it in flashbacks. So that's what I did. But it's the inciting incident that set everything in motion. It was Adam Hunter's last hit. The main character is named Adam Hunter. And in the literary motif here is that Adam in Hebrew means humankind, and he's in search of peace. So Adam Hunter represents a violent humanity out of control in search of peace. Anyway, he's supposed to take care of this Bedouin terrorist, and he has planted a bomb in a minivan on West 114th Street in Upper West Side Manhattan. And he's kind of hunched down like a homeless man across the street. But instead, the Bedouin's girlfriend comes and gets in the minivan. And then all of a sudden, his own wife, his new wife, is walking down the same street toward the minivan because she's seen a note where he might be, and she wanted to surprise him. And then there's a young man walking up toward the minivan, and when the Bedouin's girlfriend gets in the van, the driver turns the key, it explodes and kills all 3 of them.
Oh boy.
He is so distraught. In the intervening years, he's gone to seminary, and now he's come to Maryville, Tennessee, to be the pastor of a church where the fiance of the young man is a member, because he wants to be close to her and he feels bad. He is never expecting what happens, which is she gets interested in him and begins to fall in love with him, not knowing that he killed her fiance by accident.
This is a beautiful introduction, just to get people involved and say, you know what, I want to buy this novel. I want to buy a copy of Assassin's Manuscript. And this is a great time, right? It's winter. We need a little bit of something different, right? We're trapped inside. Perfect time to buy a novel and read it. And in fact, this is what I recommend to people. Hit the add to cart. Amazon makes it easy. Have one sent to yourself, and then send one to a friend, and just put their address in, have it show up, and be the hero. This is a great thing about Amazon. You can just send it to them, and then have your own little book club about this. So we got this. This is an intriguing introduction, but you did some background research on this. You talked to some actual hitmen. And we're surprised, but you've been able to add that into Assassin's Manuscript. Tell us about that.
Well, like James Michener, I like to try to do lots of research. So I traveled to all 7 foreign countries that are in the novel itself. And I actually went to every place that's described except the papal apartments. I didn't know the Pope, and I had two good friends who did, and so they could describe that to me. But I like to find out as much as I can about what I'm writing, and so I'm an extrovert, and I like to meet people, and so I met a taxi driver at midnight who took me to downtown Louisville and had a big beard, and I could tell he was from New York with a cup of coffee, you know. And I said, "When did you come here?" I came here after Nam. What'd you do in Nam? I was in the Phoenix Project. Well, because I'd done research, I knew that was assassins. So I said, "You have to pick up anybody else?" "No." "If I cross your palm with $100 bill, can we have a drink and you can tell me stories?" And oh yeah, he was ready to open up and talk. So that was one. There were three Americans. The other one is a librarian at a seminary. He's actually a minister who was a hitman, and
Wow.
he was on an accreditation site visit team that I was leading and doing an accreditation of another institution. And we were having dinner, and he said, "Oh, that's what I used to do." So he said, "There are countries I can't even go to anymore." And I thought, good gracious. So every time I met these people, I would take notes.
Mhm.
The other one is the son of he's a philosophy professor at a college, and he's the son of a hitman who told me that his father told him on his deathbed that's what he used to do. And he said, you would never have guessed it. He was a regular little league dad in the neighborhood. The other two were an Israeli and Russian, and very interesting people that I just met at different points in my life. The Israeli had Arafat in his sights twice, and the order never came to take the shot.
Wow.
And you would think, why would these people talk to you? Well, I don't know. I don't know whether they just wanted to bare their souls. I don't know what it was. But the Russian is now a minister up in the Ural Mountains, and he was a mafia chief.
So this is an interesting thing. So back many years ago, having talked with a lot of servicemen who had come back from Vietnam, and they experienced a lot of, I'll say, the horror of war. And now our Middle East and Afghanistan veterans and some of the veterans that we have, they've also experienced this. And there was something that I found that people that go through these types of experiences go one of two ways. They go off the deep end, wacko, say, or they end up having a deep appreciation of life. And these folks that you've talked to, I think, have gone that way, that they may have been in this terrible circumstance, but they have come to have a deep appreciation for life.
I think that's a good assessment. I will say that people who are in the military who have to experience the horrors of war aren't exactly the same as the five that I interviewed, because real hitmen are cold as ice. I don't know if you remember the movie Carlos the Jackal that Bruce Willis was in, and toward the end of the movie, he's trying to get close to, I don't know, he's going to take out the vice president or something. And he befriends a guy who can get him close. And he's in that guy's apartment, and he's gotten everything he needs from him. And he's tired of the guy. The guy's jabbering away. And he's watching, Bruce Willis is watching TV. And he's eating Chinese food. And the guy keeps jabbering and jabbering. So he picks up his silencer and he goes, thump, thump, puts it back down, goes back to eating his Chinese food. That's a real hitman, cold as ice. And somewhere in the novel, my main character is confronted by the main female character, pushing him to talk about what he used to do. And it's very awkward for him. And he does begin to open up and talk, but I couldn't have done those scenes without having talked to real hitmen.
Well, and I'm going to go back to part of your background of writing these nonfiction books. So you've written a number of different books around Christianity and theology, and I'll just say exploring the human condition. And so, how do these come together when I'm reading Assassin's Manuscript?
Yes, that's a great question. I would say that one of the main ways it comes together is that this is not a typical Tom Clancy, there are good guys and bad guys, where the Americans are always good guys and everybody else is whatever, you know. In my novel, because, and I'll just use theological terms, because of original sin, which is both universal and it's radical, that it goes to the core of our being, it touches every one of us. Because of that, all the characters in my novel are flawed, not just the ones that you think are the enemies. It's not good guys and bad guys. And it's either Augustine or some theologian who said, there is good in every evil person and evil in every good one. And if you read this novel, you'll be surprised that it's got a Jack Ryan, Jason Bourne feel to it.
Yeah.
But everybody's flawed. And that's my faith coming through, I think, in some ways.
Well, I think that's what makes Assassin's Manuscript I will say a better novel, because it's not just an action adventure story in words, but it's an examination of us as humans. And I think this is the benefit of reading Assassin's Manuscript, is we get to evaluate ourselves.
It's exactly
in
right.
Complicated world. Yeah.
Yeah. I had other names for it earlier, like the Codex from Sinai and all kinds of, because it's about the robbery of a famous codex called Codex Sinaiticus from the British Museum in London, which is kind of interesting because last summer there were all these articles coming out in The Economist and The Guardian, lots of newspapers about artifacts being stolen from the British Museum. And here my novel starts with the robbery of the famous codex. But there's more going on here than just a beach read. I mean, this could be seen as a beach read. Like James Patterson, I've got short chapters with a hook at each end, and we're jumping around the world in different places. And I remind people, if you get the book, make sure you look at the list of characters at the end, because that'll help you keep up with what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going in lots of different directions. But there's another level, and it's a literary level. And I mentioned earlier with Adam Hunter, the main female character, Rennie, her nickname is Rennie, but that's short for Irene, which in Greek means peace. So she's the only one who can complete his mythic story. And there are a couple of other characters whose names have deeper literary meaning. So what's going on here is, in many ways, Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces, where you have ordinary man. I mean, that's the background for the Star Wars movies. You have ordinary character who's the hero, has to leave ordinary world to go to extraordinary world, do something different, has to meet with the mentor, which is Yoda. In my case, it's Stump Stevens, who's the first African-American CIA director, by the way. Stump Stevens is a key character, and that's Adam's mentor. In fact, the chapter where he goes to meet him is called An Old Friend. And then he has to meet later his shadow self, just as in the Star Wars movies, it's Darth Vader, but in Adam's case, it's the Bedouin. So there's a lot more going on than just a fast-paced beach read.
Yeah. Well, that's what I like about this, is that these are the best stories are the ones that we can insert ourselves, right? We can decide, what would I do there? And then when you turn the page and you go, oh, why did you do that?
That's right. That's right.
So a great taking this the richness of the human character and how we interact and these circumstances that we're in, and this research that you've done with real life folks and brought this into the story also comes alive in the audio version. And this is just a fascinating story behind how you took the written word, which Alex Haley from Roots said you need to write this novel. And so now you have it. And I'm sure he's looking down and saying, thank you, William, for following through on this. Uh, how did the audio version come about on this?
Yeah. So I've got a lot of friends. A lot of people have friends who say, I don't read books, I listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I listen to them when I jog, or I listen to them when I drive, wherever, or whatever it is. And your novel sounds really interesting, but I don't know. I don't read books much. So it was over a year after no, it's about a year after I published it. I started thinking, I think I need to think about an audiobook. And our actor son in Brooklyn, in New York, named David Carl, who you can find on IMDb. He's been on TV shows like Blue Bloods, and he was in last 2 years ago, George Clooney's The Tender Bar, and a really cool scene with Ben Affleck. And he's in last summer's the final season of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a trained actor, studied at University of Evansville. One of his fellow classmates is Rami Malek, who won the Oscar. So he's had really good training. He also did it at Rutgers, MFA at Rutgers. And he's also an expert on international accents, and he can do impressions. He has one show where he does, I don't know, 200 impressions in an hour or something like that. It's just kind of amazing. So he's done parts of audio books for James Patterson. So he's experienced in it. He has a studio at home. He knows how to do it, get the right mastering. So I just thought, why not? Let's have a father-son. I think it's the only father-son author-narrator collaboration in the country. Can you think of another one, Scott?
I can't think of another one. And
I mean, parent,
you definitely have a first there. Yeah,
I know some where there are cousins, but
sure.
I don't know any parent-child or child-parent. And so we just had fun with this thing. I mean, we always have fun. He's our second son. Our older son is a teaching tennis pro in DC, who's also published books and on tennis. But David and I would get together. He'd read a few chapters, and then I'd listen to him and tell him where he needs to change a word or this and that. And we spent months working on it, and then all of a sudden, boom! And he hired a very professional group to do the final mastering, and ACX approved it within like 3 or 4 days, which usually takes 10 days because it was so professionally done.
Yeah, and I'll just let people know that the ACX standards are very exacting. So Amazon doesn't want just anything to go out there. So it's going to have a high quality. So the noise, the backgrounds, the amount of lead and back end, there's a lot that goes into it. And I know I've done a couple of audiobooks myself, and it's a ton of work. But if you get the right people, it helps. But the whole voicing, I think, is really interesting because in today's world of AI voices, and there's a lot of them out there, and we hear them all the time. You didn't just get an AI voice to read this. You got a trained actor who does the voices. So you're really listening more like to an audio program than an audio book. And that's one of the things I think really sets the audio version of Assassin's Manuscript apart from the other stories that are out there.
Yeah, he does all these different British, Scottish, German, Italian, lots of different kinds, even New Orleans, Cajun, and East Tennessee. Mm-hmm. I mean, he can do all these accents. And so you feel like you're listening. Well, some reviewers have said they can almost see this movie on the screen as they read the book. They could see it on the screen. Well, when David reads it, you could just practically visualize the whole thing. And if you're there watching with the card, just go to the audiobook and click on the free sample. Those of you who are watching, it's just a little 5-minute free sample just to hear what his voice sounds like. It's pretty.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's a great idea. That's and I'll just put this out there now for people. And just remind them that we are talking with William Carl, and he has written Assassin's Manuscript. It's available right here on Amazon in both paperback and Kindle, but also the audio version. And maybe there's someone out there, William, that is going to call you and say, what do we need to do to option the rights on this for a series? Because
That'd be great.
as you're talking about this and all of the background, so it's describing the scenes where you've been, the countries that you've been, the locations, even the Vatican apartments, that you have people that were actually there, because to be able to describe it. And I was thinking of an interview that I heard with Michael Crichton, and he was accused one time of writing books so they could be movies. And he said, no, the way I write is just to describe the scene so it becomes visual. So it's easy to make movies. I think Assassin's Manuscript is going to be one of those where people, as they read it, they're going to see these visions like Tolkien, right? I didn't want to go to see the Tolkien Lord of the Rings movies because I knew what Hobbiton looked like. I knew the Shire and all of these places. But it turns out that Tolkien wrote so well that Stephen Jackson had the same vision that I did. And so we all saw that. So this is what I see with Assassin's Manuscript is that you and I'm going to maybe ask you to actually read a passage yourself here, because I want to get a vision of what it's like inside the covers of Assassin's Manuscript.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm putting you on the spot.
No, that's okay. I'll take a look here at something. But I wanted to mention that the business about screenplays, when I first wrote this, it was 740 pages. Okay. So think about this, like huge. And I brought it into a literary agent in Dallas, dropped it on his desk. He said, "You nearly broke my desk with that thing." He said, "Go take 200 pages out and I'll look at it." Well, that's like killing your babies. I mean,
sure.
I worked hard on that book. That's when I realized, and I say this often, that a great story, novel, screenplay, play, poem is not written, it's rewritten.
Mm-hmm.
And you need good, honest people reading it. You need editors who are really ruthless with you about how to make it the best it can be. I think it's Stephen King in his book on writing says, to write is human, to edit is divine. Isn't that a great line?
There we go. That's we'll say that's tweetable.
Isn't that a great line? And so what I did was someone suggested that I learn how to write screenplays. So I did. And I even won the Telluride Indie Fest screenwriting contest with a totally different type story, a romantic comedy about a matchmaker who finds out she's dying of cancer and tries to match her with her husband before she's gone. And she does match her with her hospice nurse, not realizing that they were lovers in college, and the whole audience knows, but she doesn't know. And when they fall in love again, she finds out she's going to live. And how do we unravel that dilemma? It's called Maggie's Perfect Match, and we've been shopping. I've turned it into a play. But what it did for me with the novel was it helped me tighten the story, so that there's a scene in one place where the Bedouin has someone killed, and he calls this main CIA rogue character. And in the earlier version of the novel, I had him say, "Okay, we have had the monk killed now, and I've got the manuscript that Adam Hunter will deliver. You'll have to give it to him." And the person coaching me said, no, he wouldn't say any of that. He'd simply say, "It's done." Because the audience and the reader can see what's happened. Right. So what happens when you learn how to write screenplays is you learn to tighten the story. The other thing you learn is, you learn this in novel writing too, is to make sure that this is about characters. A great story is about really good characters, and not just the main characters. All the characters need to have something they want. Sure. And something they're seeking. And of course, the writer then creates obstacles that keep them from getting it as they try to get it. And then they, in a good story, they get what they want, but you're surprised at how they get it.
We've seen that with Tom Clancy stories, right? Where you're reading and he starts developing this character and you start get attached to him and you turn the page and he's dead. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
I was just getting to know this character.
I know.
Right?
I know.
They
Yeah.
had a life and this things and they're looking forward to it. And you turn the page and it's like,
Yeah.
but that's
now,
good writing.
the thing that happens if you're really doing a good job, I think, in writing, is you get to know the characters so well that they begin talking to you.
Yes.
It sounds like I'm hearing voices and a little spooky, but I could actually hear Adam Hunter say to me, "No, that is not how I would say that."
Mm-hmm.
Rennie Ellis would say, "No, that's not what I would do in this situation. This is what I would do." And they began to help me write the novel.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think that's right. I think if you've done the research and you know the character of the character, that this makes total sense. It was Isaac Asimov said that when he wrote a novel, he knew the beginning and the end, but the characters took him on the journey of writing. Now, as you're preparing to read here, and I do want to get into that, is and you said the first copy of this was 700 some pages.
740 pages. Yeah.
740 pages. Dan Aykroyd, when he was talking about the Blues Brothers movie, it was something similar to that. It was like 3 movies that they had written. And then they had to pare it down to that original movie that came out in 1980 that was so wonderful. And they had to do the Blues Brothers 2000 because it was there was so much content there. So yeah, are you ready?
I'll tell you what I'm going to do is just read a few sentences of what is this is the free sample on the audiobook.
Oh, perfect.
Because I want you to hear the author read it and then hear how much better the narrator does with the free sample, because he just brings this thing to life. So this is a chapter. By the way, I used chapter titles instead of numbers. Mm-hmm. You know, it's 77 chapters. It's boring. 1, 2, 17, 18, 19, you know, and it's sort of funny here, you know, all writing is autobiographical. So these were just like sermon titles to me. I mean, you know, just come up with a way it's inviting, enticing, but don't tell too much, tell a little bit, whatever. This is a chapter called Ancient Ruins. And Adam has just now gotten to Rome, and it says Rome. Adam had carried on a lover's quarrel with Rome all his life. Although his Italian was a little rusty, he had no trouble making his way to the Borghese Gardens overlooking the Piazza del Popolo, where he was to meet his contact. Rome seemed to Adam like one large inhabited work of art. In the distance, St. Peter's rose majestically above the Tiber. Next to San Pietro, he could see the top of Tosca's Castel d'Angelo. Large stone lions guarded the Egyptian obelisk in the piazza below him, where artists and lovers gathered and gypsy children targeted unsuspecting tourists. A quick glance at his watch told him his contact was late. He tried to remember how long he'd known Giovanni, a Jesuit who'd mastered the priestly curriculum at the Catholic seminary before signing on at Langley. They'd met first at the farm, CIA's grueling training center at Camp Perry, Virginia, and later at the Pentagon School of the Americas at Fort Benning in Georgia, otherwise known as the School of the Assassins. Though he hadn't seen Giovanni for years, he knew one thing about him: he was always on time. Then he saw him, a monk in Muslim alb, emerging from the trees. A hooded man walked toward him with a look of panic in his face. He began yelling in Italian, but was silenced by the sniper's bullet that caught him at the base of the skull. He was dead before he hit the ground. And it goes on from there.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love it. And now people can take William Carl's reading of his own words, compare it to his son's reading.
The son surpasses the father. I will tell you right now.
Well, I was thinking about all those requests I receive from modeling agencies saying, Scott, well, we need a before model. Would you? No. So William, thank you for reading that. That just gives people a glimpse into it. Now we can go here in the audio version right here on Amazon and compare that. And I'm going to put this back up and remind people that right there in the carousel, Assassin's Manuscript, click on it, add to cart. I'm recommending create a book club. So send copies to your friends and get into the mind of Adam Hunter.
I love meeting with book clubs, by the way, and I do that with book clubs all over the country on Zoom. And some I go in person, and it's just fascinating to me to hear what people say about this novel, Assassin's Manuscript. I'll hold it up one more time. Because, as I've often said, each reader imagines and creates the book in his or her own mind. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens when we read. And you may actually read a slightly different book than the person next to you because you are bringing your own filter of human experience to that. I wanted to mention that sometimes I've asked when they say, wait a minute, this a former CIA assassin becomes a minister in Maryville, Tennessee, which is where we live now in retirement. And then they'll look at me and they'll go, is this autobiographical?
Confessions of a Dangerous Mind.
And I smile and say, well, you know, all writing is autobiographical. And I pause.
This is Chuck Barris all over, right?
And I say, and by the way, I did have a course in Taekwondo karate, 3 years of it, in seminary to handle rough parishioners. You know, it was actually a course in my seminary. And so I have Adam Hunter say that at one point, and I actually have him say something else when a bank robber sticks a gun in his face because I had somebody pull a knife on me. Mm-hmm. And I said, you do not want me to do what I'm about to do to you. And he backed away. And that's what happened. Well, you know, you can read in the novel to see what happens.
Well, we definitely want people to get a copy of Assassin's Manuscript. Paperback, hard Kindle, and the Audible version by your son David, who is a trained actor, does all the voices. So all these character voices. So people are really going to be drawn in. And in fact, maybe they want to do both, get the audio and the written version.
Yeah, some people are getting the book and starting to read it, and then they listen to the audio and they can see it on the page as he reads it, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, I love that. That's I don't know how many books that I have like this that I've reread too, because you go, well, I just want to travel to Rome. And what are some of the other countries that you visited?
So Egypt, and particularly the Sinai, because St. Catherine's Monastery is at the foot of Mount Sinai. It's a 6-story fortress built by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian. And Adam Hunter travels there because he has to meet someone there. And he even climbs Mount Sinai, which is what pilgrims do. And I did that myself to do the research. And I had a letter of introduction from the patriarch of the whole Greek Orthodox Church in Istanbul, just as my main character does too. And then I climbed the mountain in the middle of the night. Pilgrims from all over the world climb Mount Sinai. It's only a 3,000 foot climb, so it's not huge, but it works you know. And you get there, start at 3 a.m. and you get there at sunrise and watch the sunrise.
Oh my word.
I was able to do that. Adam Hunter has something very exciting happen to him when he goes up that side.
So people can travel with Adam up the mountain and expect something, but not what they expected.
And there are other scenes in the Sinai Desert right near Gaza, which is kind of interesting given what's going on in the world today. The novel ends in some ways in Jerusalem and then back at St. Catherine's Monastery. But it was fun doing. I mean, in Russia, went to the places in Russia as well. And I've lectured at the St. Tihan's Orthodox University, which is a Russian Orthodox university, because our seminary, where I was president, Pittsburgh Seminary, created a partnership type relationship, first one in the history of the United States with a Russian university. And so what you do when you travel to these places in a novel is you feel like you've been there. You probably had that experience, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's but being there in 3D is, as my wife says, is a very different experience in some ways, right? Because there's more senses that take on, right? The sounds and the smells of being physically in that spot.
And when I went to the British Museum in London, I befriended the gallery warders there with the guards and said, I'm really concerned about how you protect these documents. How would somebody steal something? Oh, we don't want to tell anybody how you'd steal. I said, I'm a minister. You can tell me. And then they told me how. They said, well, every day we turn a page in this old manuscript, but if somebody bumps the case, it sets off all the alarms. I said, well, what happens if you turn the page? Oh, we turn off all the alarms to turn the page. That's when I could have it stolen in the novel.
Well, I'm going to encourage people to get Assassin's Creed and find out, or Assassin's Creed is the game. Sorry, Assassin's Manuscript, and travel around the world to these different places. And again, it's all this human stories, this interaction. That's these the flawed people that we are.
Yeah. And think about it as a Dan Brown meets Daniel Silva story. Nice. So if you like Dan Brown, if you like Daniel Silva or Tom Clancy, I mean, this is Jack Ryan or James Bond meets Indiana Jones. It's old archaeology, old manuscripts in an international espionage story that takes place right now.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of some of these Tom Hanks and National Treasure with who was it that was a National Treasure?
Nicolas Cage. Was it Nicolas
Cage? Yeah. I like it. He just had another movie come out that we've enjoyed. But and so I'm going to remind people, if you're out there and you want to option this, better get on it quick. Because this is one of those stories that is it's complex and allows you to crawl into it and kind of live in this.
Well, I will say also that there are surprises in it and twists and turns and things you didn't see coming. But if you read it a second time, you'll see where I dropped little hints. It may only be a word or a phrase, but when you read it the second time, people read through, oh, now I see how that was going to happen. You don't catch it as much the first time through.
Well, William, I've just been having a lot of fun chatting with you here, and I'm going to put this back up. We've got Assassin's Manuscript, and when a former CIA assassin's last hit goes awry, well, there's a lot of pages that follow that. You can get it in the paperback, in Kindle, and in audio version, and do a book club. So if people wanted to get a hold of you, and tell us how people can get a hold of you. Yeah. Maybe have you at their book club or some appearances that you're going to make. People can sign. Have you sign their book.
Yeah. Well, I don't mind giving out my email. It's okay. It's 311 Bill C, BILLC, 311 Bill C at gmail.com. Or you can go on, I have a website, which is LeConte.com. It's one word, LECONTE, publishing.com, and www in front of that. That's a little publishing firm I created not to publish books, but to help people who are trying to write, to give them insights and support. And I have a lot of mentors on there who have given their advice on their ups and their downs and their joys and frustrations as writers and artists. And so you might want to look at LeConte Publishing sometime.
There we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what about appearances? Are you going to be at the Texas Library Association in?
I was there last year. But I've got a conflict on that this year. I know Liz Lawless would really like for me to be there, and she's got a few more of my books. And if she's watching, I think I'll just let her try to sell a few or give a few away while she's at the TL.
I'm disappointed that you won't be there because I will be there.
I heard you and Christine are both going to be there.
Yeah, we're both going to be down at the Texas Library Association coming up middle of April. So,
did she tell you what happened last year?
This is a great story to end on, and so tell us.
So I had sent her a whole box of my novel of Assassin's Manuscript. To hold it up one more time, and so that we could sell them at TLA, at the Texas Library Association annual conference. They were also featured at the American Library Association. Anyway, so she had them in a suitcase. I had them delivered to her in Dallas. She had them in a suitcase, and they got out of the car with the other people, and they put it on the sidewalk. And they went on in. And so here's the suitcase on the sidewalk. And security came and got it and hauled it into their safe. Like they didn't know what this was. And it could be a bomb, whatever. And so then she comes looking around, finally hears that maybe security's got it. And she came in and she said, I think I left a suitcase and it has some books. Yeah, we're kind of concerned about it. These books are titled Assassin's Manuscript. This isn't a bomb, is it? It's so funny. So she had to kind of go through that. But anyway, it all worked.
That's fabulous. That's a great story. That's a good one to end on. William, it's been fabulous talking with you today. And I'm going to put this up as we go out. Hang on here. We'll go into the green room. But again, thank you for joining me here today.
It's great to be with you, Scott. Thanks.
Well, here it is, Assassin's Manuscript, William J. Carl. Look him up, and you can find him right here on Amazon. Click Add to Cart, buy a couple copies, have your own book club, and reach out to Bill, we call him Bill. William Carl, reach out and have him come to your book club. With that, we're going to sign off. Thanks to everyone for joining here on Amazon Live. Have a fabulous day. Cheers.